Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We've got some incredible stories lined up for you today that I seriously can't wait to share. But before we dive into all that, I'm super curious about something. Where in the world are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And just for fun, let me know what time it is for you. It's always so amazing to see how our community spans across so many different time zones. It really feels like we're all connected, no matter where we are. All right, let's get into it. The first night in our Arizona Airbnb was perfect. My girlfriend, Sarah, and I were celebrating our anniversary, and this secluded house tucked away in the desert seemed like a dream. The stars were incredible, a thick blanket of diamonds against a black velvet sky. We sat on the back patio, sipping wine, listening to the gentle hum of the desert at night. That's when I first saw it. Just a flicker of movement at the edge of the property, where the manicured lawn met the untamed wilderness. I dismissed it as a coyote or a deer, common in these parts. But a small, cold knot of unease began to form in my stomach. I didn't say anything to Sarah. I didn't want to ruin the moment. The second night, the feeling returned, stronger this time. We were inside, watching a movie, when a strange, scratching sound came from the back door. It wasn't the sound of an animal's claws. It was more rhythmic, more deliberate, like someone dragging a single, long fingernail down the wood. I muted the TV. We both held our breath, listening. The scratching stopped. I peered through the peephole, but saw nothing but the dark, empty patio. Sarah suggested it was just the wind, the house settling. I wanted to believe her, but the knot in my stomach was now a cold, heavy stone. Later that night, I was jolted awake by a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a voice, whispering my name from just outside our bedroom window. Jake. It was a dry, raspy sound, like sandpaper on bone. But it was my name. I froze, every muscle in my body screaming. Sarah was fast asleep beside me. I slowly, carefully, sat up and crept to the window, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I pulled the curtain back just a fraction of an inch, and there it was. Standing in the moonlight was a figure. It was tall, unnaturally so, with limbs that seemed too long for its torso. It was gaunt, emaciated, its skin stretched tight over its bones like old parchment. But the face wasn't human. The eyes were too large, too dark, and they glowed with a faint, predatory light. Its mouth was a wide, lipless slash that stretched almost to its ears. It wasn't looking at the window. It was looking straight up at the roof, its head tilted at an impossible angle. It took me a moment to realize what it was doing. It was listening. Listening to the house, to us. I let the curtain drop, my hand shaking uncontrollably. I stumbled back from the window, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. This wasn't a coyote. This wasn't the wind. This was something else. Something ancient and wrong. It woke Sarah, my voice a panicked whisper. We have to leave, now. She saw the pure terror in my eyes and didn't argue. We threw on clothes, grabbed our keys and wallets, and didn't even bother packing. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep behind us. As we scrambled for the front door, we heard it again. The scratching. But this time it wasn't at the back door. It was on the roof. A slow, heavy scraping sound, like something massive dragging itself across the shingles, right above our heads. Then came a new sound, a low, guttural clicking, a noise that vibrated through the very walls of the house. It was getting closer, moving towards the front of the house, as if it knew we were trying to escape. I fumbled with the deadbolt, my fingers numb and clumsy. Sarah was crying silently behind me. The clicking sound was directly over the front porch now. I finally got the door open and we burst out into the night. We didn't look back. We sprinted to the car, the gravel of the driveway crunching loudly under our feet. I jammed the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life with a sound that was the sweetest I had ever heard. As I threw the car into reverse, the headlights swept across the front of the house. For a split second, the beam caught the thing. It was crouched on the edge of the roof, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the night sky. It looked down at us, and for the first time, I saw its mouth open. It didn't make a sound, but a wave of pure, primal dread washed over me. It was a look of hunger, not for food, but for something else. Our fear, our lives. I slammed my foot on the gas, the tires screaming as we peeled out of the driveway and onto the dirt road. I didn't slow down. I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a terrifying moment, I thought I saw it running behind us, keeping pace with the car with an eerie, loping gait, its long limbs eating up the distance. But then it was gone, swallowed by the darkness and the dust cloud we left behind. We drove for what felt like hours, not stopping until we hit the bright lights of a 24-hour gas station on the main highway. We didn't talk. We couldn't. The image of that thing on the roof was burned into my mind. We left everything behind in that Airbnb. Our clothes, our luggage, our anniversary gifts. We called the rental company from the road and made up some story about a family emergency. We never told them the real reason. Who would believe us? To this day, I can't explain what we saw. I've read the local legends, the old stories about creatures that can mimic voices and wear the skins of animals, or even men. Things that hunt in the deep desert night. I don't know if that's what it was, but I know it was real. Sometimes, when the night is too quiet, I can still hear it. That dry, raspy whisper. Jake. And I know that a part of me never really left that Arizona backyard. It's still there, frozen in terror, under the cold, watchful gaze of those glowing eyes. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for more stories. Stay safe out there. Have you ever had that feeling? That prickling on the back of your neck like you're being watched? I get it all the time now. It's been 6 months since I quit my job, but the memory, the image, is burned into my mind. I used to be a geological surveyor. My team and I worked for a company that mined rare earth elements, the kind of stuff they use to make powerful magnets. Our last job was out in the Nevada desert, not too far from the glitter of Las Vegas, but far enough that you felt completely and utterly alone. The site was an old, abandoned open-pit mine. Our task was to survey the area for new deposits. It was hot, dusty, and tedious work. Days were spent hiking across treacherous terrain, setting up equipment, and taking readings. We were a 4-person team. Me, Dave, our senior geologist, and 2 techs, Mike and Sarah. We were camped about a mile from the mine itself. At night, the desert is a different world. The silence is so profound it's almost deafening, broken only by the wind or the distant cry of a coyote. The first few days were normal. We established our grid, started the survey, and settled into a routine. It was on the 3rd night that things started to feel off. I was on watch, sitting by the campfire, when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. It wasn't an animal I recognized. It was a low, guttural clicking, almost like someone chattering their teeth, but deeper, more resonant. It seemed to come from the direction of the old mine. I scanned the darkness with my flashlight, but saw nothing. The sound stopped as suddenly as it began. I tried to brush it off as a weird desert animal, but a seed of unease was planted. The next day, we were working on the western ridge of the mine pit. It was a massive, gaping hole in the earth, hundreds of feet deep with terraced levels spiraling down. As I was setting up a theodolite, I glanced across the pit to the opposite side, maybe half a mile away. That's when I saw it. A figure, standing on the edge of one of the lower terraces. It was too far to make out details, just a tall, slender silhouette against the reddish rock. It was completely still. I figured it was just another member of our team, maybe Mike, who had a habit of wandering off. "Hey Dave," I called over. "Is that Mike over there?" Dave shielded his eyes and squinted. "No, Mike's right here, helping Sarah with the core samples." "Who is that?" We all looked. The figure remained motionless. It was unnerving. We were on private land, miles from any public road. No one else was supposed to be out here. "Probably just a hiker who's lost," Sarah suggested. But her voice was tight. We watched it for a few more minutes. It didn't move a muscle. We had work to do, so we eventually turned back to our equipment. But we all kept casting nervous glances across the chasm. When I looked back about 10 minutes later, It was gone. That night, the clicking sound returned, but this time it was closer to our camp. Much closer. We all heard it. Dave grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight and swept the beam across the perimeter of our camp. The light caught 2 pinpricks of bright, reflective light low to the ground, like an animal's eyes, but they were too far apart, and they seemed to be moving in a way that wasn't natural. Then, they vanished. We stayed up for a while after that, all of us too spooked to sleep. Dave kept his hunting rifle close. The 5th day was the day everything escalated. We decided to work in pairs for safety. Dave and I took the east ridge, while Mike and Sarah took the west. The air felt heavy, charged with a strange tension. Every snap of a twig, every gust of wind made me jump. We were about an hour into our work when my radio crackled. It was Mike. His voice was breathless, panicked. "Get over here! Now?" "Something's wrong with Sarah." Dave and I dropped everything and ran. We sprinted along the rim of the pit, our boots kicking up dust. When we reached their position, we found Mike kneeling beside Sarah, who was sitting on the ground, pale and shaking. "What happened?" Dave demanded. "We were taking readings," Mike stammered, and Sarah just screamed. She pointed down into the pit and just started screaming. I looked where he was, indicating. Down on one of the lower terraces, the same one as yesterday, was the figure. But this time, it was closer. Much closer. It was maybe only a few hundred feet below us now. And it wasn't just standing there, it was waving. A slow, deliberate wave, like an old friend greeting you from a distance. But there was nothing friendly about it. The figure was gaunt, unnaturally tall and thin, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. Its movements were jerky, disjointed. As we all stared in frozen horror, it started to climb. It didn't use the service roads or paths cut into the rock. It moved straight up the sheer cliff face. It scrambled up the rock with a terrifying, insect-like speed, its long limbs finding impossible holds. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. The way it moved was wrong, a grotesque parody of a person climbing. "We need to go. Now." Dave's voice was a low growl. He was already pulling Sarah to her feet. We didn't need to be told twice. We abandoned everything, tens of thousands of dollars worth of surveying equipment, and ran for our lives. We didn't look back. The sounds that followed us will haunt me forever. A horrible, wet, clicking sound, mixed with a perfect mimicry of Sarah's scream. It echoed off the canyon walls, sounding like it was coming from everywhere at once. We scrambled into our truck, Dave flooring the accelerator before the doors were even fully shut. We tore down the dirt track, dust billowing behind us, not slowing down until we had paved road an hour later. We never spoke about the details of what we saw. We didn't have to. We all knew. When we got back to the office in Vegas, we reported a hostile encounter with a trespasser and equipment failure due to the extreme heat. We couldn't tell them the truth. Who would believe us? They'd think we were crazy or on drugs. We all quit within the week. I couldn't go back into the desert. I couldn't even look at the mountains on the horizon without feeling a cold dread creep up my spine. I did some research later, late at night when I couldn't sleep. I fell down a rabbit hole of local legends and Native American folklore. I read about creatures that can mimic voices, that move with unnatural speed, that hunt in the desolate places of the world. The descriptions, the stories, they were too close to what we experienced. Sometimes, when I'm driving at night, I'll see a tall, thin figure standing by the side of the road in my peripheral vision. I never looked directly at it. I just grip the steering wheel, push down on the gas, and pray it's just my mind playing tricks on me. But I know it's not. I know that thing from the mine remembers me, and sometimes I have this chilling thought that it's just waiting. That one day, it will finish its climb. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoy Tales of the Unexplained, be sure to follow for more. We were supposed to be a group of 8, a tight-knit circle of friends escaping the city for a long weekend of camping in the remote Arizona wilderness. 8 of us packed into 2 sturdy SUVs, laughing and sharing stories as the cityscape melted into a vast, empty desert under a sky bruised with twilight. The plan was simple. Set up camp, tell stories by the fire, and forget the world existed. We were experienced campers, or so we thought. None of us were prepared for what the desert had in store. The first night was perfect. The air was crisp. The stars were a brilliant, scattered dust, and the only sounds were the crackling fire and our own voices. We did a head count before turning in, a silly ritual we'd adopted years ago. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Liam counted, pointing his flashlight at each of us. All present and accounted for. We zipped up our tents with a sense of peace, lulled to sleep by the distant call of a coyote. The second night, the atmosphere shifted. A strange stillness fell over the campsite as the sun went down. The usual desert symphony was gone, replaced by a profound, unnerving silence. Even the fire seemed to burn without its usual cheer, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on our eyes. We tried to ignore the growing unease, chalking it up to fatigue. Liam, ever the responsible one, decided to do the nightly ed. He swept his flashlight beam across our faces, his voice steady. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He paused, frowning, and counted again. Slower this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He lowered the flashlight, his face pale. I spoke up, my own voice tight. Liam, what's wrong? There are 8 of us. Look at me. Then at the others huddled around the fire. No, he whispered, his voice trembling. I counted 9. A cold dread washed over us. We all looked around. There were only 8 of us, visible in the firelight. Maya laughed, nervously. You must have miscounted, Liam. Maybe you counted someone twice. But Liam shook his head, his eyes wide with a terror that was becoming contagious. I didn't. I swear. There were 9 people in the circle. We did a recount ourselves, our voices overlapping. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The number was always 8, but Liam's fear was a spark that had landed on dry tinder. The silence of the desert no longer felt peaceful. It felt watchful. We tried to dismiss it, but the seed of fear had been planted. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt through our collective nerves. That night, sleep was a distant luxury. I lay in my tent, my heart pounding in my ears, listening. Sometime in the deep, dark hours, I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. It was a soft, guttural clicking, almost like someone chattering their teeth, but lower, more animalistic. It seemed to come from right outside my tent. I held my breath, frozen, convinced something was circling our campsite. Just beyond the thin nylon walls, the clicking moved, passing one tent, then another. A slow, deliberate patrol. It was the sound of a predator. The next morning, we emerged from our tents, looking haggard and sleep-deprived. No one mentioned the clicking sound, but I could see in their eyes that I wasn't the only one who had heard it. A silent agreement passed between us. We had to get out of there. We started packing with a frantic, desperate energy, stuffing sleeping bags into sacks and collapsing tents without care. The sun was rising, painting the sky in beautiful hues of orange and pink, but the beauty was lost on us. All we felt was a primal urge to flee. As we were throwing the last of the gear into the cars, Chloe screamed. We all spun around to see her pointing a trembling finger towards the edge of the clearing. Standing there, partially obscured by the twisted branches of a mesquite tree, was a figure. It was tall and impossibly thin, its limbs elongated and jointed at unnatural angles. It stood perfectly still, just watching us. It wasn't human. Its shape was wrong. Its posture was wrong. As we stared in horror, it tilted its head, a gesture so eerily human it made my stomach churn. And then, it mimicked Chloe's scream. The sound was a perfect, chilling echo, but it ended in that same low, guttural click from the night before. That broke the spell. We scrambled into the SUVs, not even bothering to close the trunks properly. Liam fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get the engine to start. I risked one last look back as we sped away, kicking up a cloud of dust. The thing was gone, vanished as if it had never been there. The drive back was silent, the 8 of us trapped in our own terrified thoughts. We never talked about what happened. It was too much, too impossible to process. But the memory hangs over us, a permanent shadow. We were a group of 8 friends. We counted 8 around the fire, but on that second night, something else was with us. Something had joined our circle, hiding in plain sight. Its presence felt but unseen. The count was off by 1 because we weren't just being hunted, we were being joined. We were part of its game, a temporary member of its pack. The most terrifying part is not knowing who it was mimicking, or who it was planning to replace. The desert holds many secrets, and we had stumbled upon one of its oldest and most malevolent. We were lucky to escape with our lives, but we left a piece of our sanity behind, lost in the whispering sands and watchful eyes of the wilderness. The first rule of camping in the desert is to always check your surroundings before you set up. The second, which I learned the hard way, is that some things out there don't want to be found. My buddy, Alex, and I'd been planning this trip for months, a deep dive into the Arizona backcountry, far from any trails or cell service. The first night was perfect. The air was crisp, the stars were a brilliant canopy, and the silence was absolute. It was the morning of the second day when the silence started to feel heavy. I was the first one up, and as I stepped out of the tent, I saw them. Tracks. Not from a coyote or a mountain lion. These were different. They were large, almost human-like, but with elongated toes and a strange, uneven gait. They formed a perfect, unbroken circle around our small campsite. Every single track pointed inward, toward our tent. My blood ran cold. It looked like something had spent the entire night just watching us. Pacing. Waiting. I woke Alex, my voice barely a whisper. He saw the tracks and his usual bravado vanished, replaced by a deep, primal fear. We didn't need to say the word. We both knew the local legends, the tailies, the old-timers tell tourists to spook them. But this wasn't a story. The tracks were real, pressed deep into the sandy soil. They didn't lead from anywhere, and they didn't lead to anywhere. They just circled. We decided to pack up, immediately. The desert suddenly felt claustrophobic, the towering rock formations like silent, judging sentinels. As we hastily stuffed our gear into our packs, a sound echoed from the canyons. It was a whistle, a soft, melodic tune that sounded eerily familiar, like a nursery rhyme I couldn't quite place. The whistling would stop, and then a moment later, we'd hear my voice. Not my actual voice, but a perfect mimicry, calling Alex's name from the rocks above. Alex? Hey, Alex, check this out. It was my exact tone, my inflection. Alex froze, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. I just shook my head, my finger pressed to my lips. The mimicry grew more desperate. It started calling for help, sounding just like me, but strained, as if I were injured. Alex. I fell, my legs broken. Help me. Every instinct screamed at us to run, but we were paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of it. How could it know my voice? How could it know his name? We knew moving toward. The sound was a death sentence. We scrambled to get everything into the truck, our hands shaking so badly we could barely buckle our seatbelts. As the engine roared to life, we heard a new sound, a loud, guttural chittering, like 1,000 insects, combined with a deep, throaty growl. It was a sound of pure rage. Then, from behind a large boulder, not 50 feet away, something rose. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs bent at angles that weren't natural. Its skin was the color of dry earth, stretched tight over a skeletal frame. But the worst part was its head. It was vaguely humanoid, but its face was a shifting, blurry mass, as if it was trying to form a face it couldn't remember. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor, the truck fishtailing in the loose dirt. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror, but Alex did. He let out a choked sob. He told me later that for a split second, as it chased us, its face had settled. It looked exactly like me, not just similar. It was my face twisted in a silent, screaming snarl. It kept pace with the truck for what felt like an eternity. Its long, spindly legs eating up the ground with unnatural speed. We hit a stretch of rocky terrain, and the truck bounced violently. I risked a glance in the mirror and saw it fall back, standing motionless in our dust cloud. We drove for 3 hours without speaking, not stopping until we hit the asphalt of a major highway. We never went back, and we never spoke of it again until now. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I hear it, that soft whistling, and I know that somewhere out there, in the vast, silent desert, a part of me is still being used. A voice that isn't mine, calling out to the next lost traveler. The tracks might have disappeared with the wind, but the memory of what made them and what they were watching will never fade. So if you're ever camping out there, and you hear a familiar voice call your name from the darkness, don't answer. Just run. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this story, make sure to follow for more. Stay safe out there. The old McGregor Garden wasn't just abandoned, it was forgotten. Tucked away at the edge of our small town, it was a place whispered about, a tangle of overgrown roses and twisted apple trees that hadn't borne fruit in decades. Locals said it held a sorrow, a lingering presence from old man McGregor's final, lonely years. For me and my friends, it was just a dare, a place to prove our courage on a moonless night. That's how it started. Anyway, it was late October, the air crisp with the smell of wood smoke and decaying leaves. I was a park ranger back then, used to the woods and its secrets. My friends, Liam and Sarah, were city-bred. Their bravery fueled by cheap beer and a desire for a good story to tell back home. We pushed through the rusted iron gate, its shriek echoing in the unnerving silence. The garden was even more chaotic up close. Thorny vines snaked across the path, and statues of cherubs were almost completely swallowed by ivy, their stone faces looking like they were crying green tears. We set up a small campfire in a clearing, the flames casting, dancing, monstrous shadows on the gnarled trees. Liam was telling a ghost story, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. When we heard the first sound, it was a snap, like a heavy branch breaking underfoot. We all froze. I told him it was probably just a deer, common in these parts, but the silence that followed felt different. It was heavy, watchful. Then came the whistle. It wasn't a bird, and it wasn't human. It was a strange, melodic three-note tune that seemed to come from all directions at once. The hairs on my arms stood up. As a ranger, I knew every bird call in this state, and this wasn't one of them. It was too perfect, too deliberate. Sarah grabbed my arm, her knuckles white. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I had no answer. We tried to laugh it off, blaming the beer and our overactive imaginations. But the feeling of being watched intensified. It felt like 100 eyes were on us, hidden in the deep, inky blackness beyond our firelight. The whistling started again, closer this time. It was the same 3 notes, but now it sounded mocking, playful in a deeply unsettling way. Liam, trying to be the brave one, stood up and shouted, "Who's there?" This isn't funny. His voice was swallowed by the garden. The only reply was a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the very ground we stood on. It wasn't a coyote or a dog. It was deeper, more guttural, filled with a malice that turned my blood to ice. That's when we saw the movement. At the edge of the firelight, a shadow detached itself from the other shadows. It was tall, unnaturally so, and moved with a fluid grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. It wasn't human. It was too slender, its limbs too long. It walked on 2 legs, but its posture was hunched, like an animal about 2 pounds. We couldn't see a face, just a silhouette against the darkness. The whistling tune came again, but this time it was from right in front of us, from that tall, dark shape. It was a perfect mimicry of a human whistle, but there was no humanity in it. Panic erupted. We scrambled for our things, kicking over our half-empty beer bottles. The fire sputtered as we stumbled away from it, plunging us into near-total darkness. The only light was the sliver of a moon that had finally peeked through the clouds. We ran. We didn't know where we were going. We just ran, away from the whistling, away from that impossible shape. Branches whipped at our faces, and thorns tore at our clothes. Behind us, we could hear it following. It wasn't running. It was loping its heavy footfalls, interspersed with an eerie, rhythmic clicking. It sounded like bones knocking together. Then, it mimicked Sarah's terrified sobs, a perfect, chilling echo of her fear. "Stop it," she screamed, her voice cracking. The mimicry only got louder, more distorted, twisting her sounds of terror into something grotesque. We finally burst out of the trees and onto the dirt road leading back to town. We didn't stop running until the streetlights were in sight. We piled into my truck, locked the doors, and sped away, leaving the forgotten garden and its nightmare behind. We never spoke of the specifics. Not really. How could we? How do you explain hearing your own fear weaponized against you? How do you describe a creature that moves like a phantom and wears the sounds of the night like a disguise? Years have passed. I'm no longer a park ranger. I moved away from that small town, trying to put as much distance as I could between myself and the McGregor garden. But some nights, when the wind is just right, I swear I can hear it. A faint, three-note whistle carried on the breeze. It's a reminder that some places are best left forgotten, and some secrets of the woods should never be disturbed. Because sometimes, when you stare into the darkness, something stares back, and it knows all of your fears. It knows how to mimic them, how to wear them, and how to hunt you with them, long after you've run away. Thanks for listening, and please, be careful where you wander after dark. The chill of the Colorado mountains is different. It's a cold that seeps right into your bones. A primal cold that whispers of things ancient and forgotten. I learned that firsthand on a full moon night, just outside a small, forgotten town that seemed to exist outside of time itself. Taysign read Silver Creek, but the locals I'd met in the last town over just called it the Whisper. Now I know why. My truck had sputtered to a stop miles back, the engine dead silent. My phone, of course, had no signal. So, primera, lisqued. The moon was a brilliant, almost predatory eye in the sky, illuminating the winding road and the dense, dark pines that crowded its edges. The air was so still you could hear your own heartbeat, a frantic drum against the silence. That's when I first heard it. A whistle. It wasn't a human whistle. Not quite. It was too perfect, too melodic, echoing through the trees with an unnatural clarity. It mimicked the call of a mountain bluebird, but it was midnight. No bird sings. At midnight, I picked up my pace, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. The whistling followed, keeping a steady distance. Sometimes it would stop, and the oppressive silence would return, somehow even more terrifying. Then, it would start again. Closer this time, from a different direction. It was playing with me. A cold sweat trickled down my spine. This wasn't just some prankster. The feeling that washed over me was one of pure, instinctual dread. I was being hunted. The lights of Silver Creek were a welcome sight. A small cluster of flickering warmth against the vast, indifferent darkness. It was a one-street town, lined with old, Western-style buildings that leaned against each other like tired old men. Not a single car was on the street. Not a single light on in any of the houses, save for the faint, yellow glow of a saloon at the far end. The rusty spurred sign read, its letters faded and peeling. It was my only option. The air grew heavy as I approached the saloon, the whistling finally fading behind me, replaced by an unnerving silence. I pushed open the swinging doors, and a handful of patrons inside all turned to look at me in unison. Their faces were weathered, etched with the harshness of the mountains, and their eyes held a look I couldn't quite place. It wasn't hostility, but it wasn't welcome either. It was a look of tired pity, as if they knew something I didn't. The bartender, a large man with a thick, graying beard, just nodded towards an empty stool. I ordered a water, my throat too dry for anything else. Truck broke down, I managed to say, my voice hoarse. He just grunted, sliding a glass across the worn wooden bar. Happens, he said, his voice a low rumble, especially on a full moon. I tried to make small talk, asking about a mechanic, a phone. The other patrons just stared into their drinks. The bartender was the only one who would speak, and Ebenten's answers were short, clipped. No mechanic till morning, he'd said. Phone lines are down. Always are when the moon is full. A strange paranoia began to creep in. It felt like they were all in on a secret, a town-wide pact of silence. Then I saw it. Hanging on the wall behind the bar, amidst dusty taxidermy and old photographs, was a string of crudely made talismans. Feathers, bits of bone, and small, carved wooden figures. My blood ran cold. I'd researched these things for my channel. They were wards, protections against something. What are those for? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The bartender followed my gaze, and his expression hardened. For the night, he said, his voice dropping low. To keep things out, things that walk. Things that mimic. My heart hammered against my ribs. He knew. They all knew. That whistle wasn't my imagination. It was whistling, I stammered. Like a bird. A shiver went through the patrons. One old man in the corner finally looked up, his eyes pale and cloudy. It likes to play with its food, he rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Tests you, sees how far you'll run. The bartender leaned in closer. You're safe in here. For tonight, we don't lock the door, because that just makes it angry. It likes the illusion of choice. But you don't leave, you don't look out. The windows, and you don't answer, no matter what you hear. His warning was absolute, leaving no room for argument. I was a prisoner in this strange, silent town. Odes, Basset. The silence in the saloon was thick, broken only by the clinking of glasses and the low hum of the generator. But outside, the night came alive. First, it was the whistle again, right outside the door, impossibly close. It was the same bluebird song, but now it sounded mocking, perverse. No one in the bar reacted. They just kept staring at their drinks, their knuckles white. Then came the scratching, a light, scraping sound against the wooden walls of the saloon. Skitter, skitter, scratch, like long nails dragging across a chalkboard. It moved around the building, a predator circling its cage. I could feel my composure cracking, the raw terror threatening to bubble over. I looked at the others. Their faces were masks of stoic resolve, but I could see the fear in their eyes. This was their reality every full moon. The scratching stopped, and then a voice, a woman's voice, crying for help. Please, please let me in. Something's chasing me. It sounded so real, so full of genuine terror. My first instinct was to jump up, to run to the door. But the bartender put a heavy hand on my shoulder, his grip like iron. Don't, he whispered, his eyes locked on mine. It learns. It takes voices. The crying turned to pleading, then to screams of agony that were cut off abruptly. Silence. My whole body was trembling. How could they just sit there? How could they let someone die out there? But then I understood. It wasn't someone, it was something. And it was trying to get one of us to break the rules. The final test was the worst. It came just before dawn, when the moon was starting to sink below the peaks. I heard my own voice, clear as day, right outside the window. Hey, it's me. I dropped my wallet. I just need to grab it. It was my voice, my exact tone, my cadence. It was a perfect, flawless mimicry. It was the most profoundly unsettling thing I have ever experienced. It was like hearing my own ghost. My mind relayed, how could it know my voice? I hadn't spoken more than a few sentences to anyone. It felt like it had reached into my head, pulled out my voice, and was now wearing it like a costume. The other patrons looked at me, their expressions a mixture of pity and terror. They had heard it too. This was what they lived with. This was the curse of Silver Creek. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky, a collective sigh of relief filled the saloon. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, as if a great weight had been removed. The bartender finally let go of my shoulder. "You can go now," he said. "It won't bother you in the daylight." I didn't need to be told twice. I practically ran out of the saloon, not daring to look back. As I walked down the deserted road, I saw them. Tracks. In the thin layer of morning frost, there were tracks leading away from the saloon. They weren't human. They were along thin, like a coyote's, but too large, too deep. And next to them, every few feet, were drag marks, as if it had been walking on two legs, but dragging its knuckles on the ground. My truck started on the first try. I didn't question it. I just drove, pushing the engine harder than I ever had before, not stopping until Silver Creek was a distant memory in my rearview mirror. I never went back, and I never will. But sometimes, on a quiet night, when the moon is full and bright, I think I can hear it. A faint, melodic whistle carried on the wind, a chilling reminder of the night a Colorado town tested my patience and very nearly broke my soul. Thanks for watching. If you have your own stories, share them in the comments, and don't forget to follow for more. Stay safe out there. The chill of the deep woods has a way of seeping into your bones. But what I experienced that night wasn't just cold, it was something else entirely. I'd taken a temp job as a security guard for a logging company. My post, a rusty old gate at the entrance to a closed-off logging road, deep in the heart of Navajo country. The company had been having issues with illegal dumping, so my job was simple. Sit in my truck, watch the gate, and report anyone trying to get in. For the first few hours, the only sound was the wind whispering through the pines and the occasional hoot of an owl. It was peaceful, almost hypnotic. Around 1 a.m., the forest went quiet. Not just peaceful, quiet, but a dead, heavy silence. The kind that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. That's when I saw it. The Mosi-activated floodlight I'd set up flickered on, illuminating the gate. The heavy iron chain that held it shut was swinging, as if someone had just dropped it. But there was no one there. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and stepped out of the truck, my heart starting to pound a rhythm against my ribs. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small and weak in the vast darkness. "This is private property. You need to leave now." The only reply was the clinking of the chain as it swayed back and forth. I walked cautiously towards the gate, sweeping my flashlight beam across the tree line. Nothing but shadows, dancing among the pines. I reached the gate and inspected the chain. The padlock was still locked, but the chain itself had been lifted off the post hook. That didn't make sense. It was a heavy, industrial chain. It couldn't have just slipped off on its own. It had to be lifted. I hooked it back on, my mind racing. Was someone playing a prank? It felt more serious than that. The oppressive silence was back, and I felt a prickly sensation on the back of my neck, the undeniable feeling of being watched. I hurried back to my truck, locked the doors, and scanned the woods again. That's when I heard it. A faint whistling sound. It wasn't a human whistle, not like a tune. It was high-pitched and disjointed, like the sound of wind being forced through a tiny crack. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. I tried to pinpoint the source, but it danced around me. First from the left, then from the right, then seemingly from right behind my truck. My blood ran cold. I'd grown up hearing the old stories from my grandfather, stories about the things that walk in the woods at night, the things you don't talk about after dark. He warned me about the sounds they make, the tricks they play. The whistling stopped as abruptly as it started. For a long moment, there was only the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then, a new sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping on the roof of my truck. Tap, tap, tap. It was slow and deliberate. I froze, my eyes wide, staring up at the ceiling of the cab. Every horror movie cliché flashed through my mind, but this was real. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone to call my supervisor, but there was no signal. Of course, I was miles from anywhere. The tapping continued, each sound sending a fresh jolt of terror through me. I didn't dare move, didn't dare make a sound. I just sat there, trapped in my metal box, listening to the impossible tapping from above. Whatever it was toying with me. It wanted me to be scared. The tapping stopped, and the silence that followed was somehow worse. I held my breath, straining my ears for any sound, and then I heard a voice. It was a perfect imitation of my supervisor, Dave. "Hey Mike, you all right in there? Saw your light on from the main road." I almost responded. The voice was perfect, the tone, the cadence, everything. But Dave was a 2-hour drive away, and there was no way he'd be out here at this hour. My grandfather's words echoed in my head. They can steal voices. They can sound like anyone you know, anyone you trust. "Dave," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The voice outside chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that was nothing like Dave's friendly laugh. "Come on out, Mike. Let's check the perimeter together." My heart hammered against my chest. It knew my name. It knew my supervisor's name. How? I hadn't said my name. I was just a temp. I stayed put, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel. The voice tried again, this time sounding annoyed. "Mike, open the door. That's an order." The imitation was still perfect, but now it had an undercurrent of something predatory, something inhumanly patient. I refused to answer. After a few tensed minutes, the voice fell silent. The oppressive feeling began to lift, but I knew it wasn't over. I scanned the darkness, my eyes darting everywhere. Then I saw movement near the tree line, just at the edge of the floodlight's reach. It was tall and gaunt, moving with a jerky, unnatural gait. It was too dark to see clearly, but its silhouette was all wrong. It was hunched over, its limbs too long, its proportions distorted. It moved from the shadow of one tree to another, not like a person sneaking, but like a spider's kit. It was watching me. I fumbled for my keys, my fingers stiff and clumsy with fear. One had to get out of there. I jammed the key into the ignition and turned. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. I tried again. Nothing. Just a series of pathetic clicks, panic setting cold and sharp. I was stranded. The figure at the edge of the woods straightened up to its full, impossible height, and I saw its eyes. They caught the light from my dashboard, glowing with a faint, predatory red. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a person. It was something else. It took a slow step out of the shadows, and I could see its form more clearly. It was covered in matted, patchy fur. Its skin stretched tight over its skeletal frame. Then it did something that shattered the last of my courage. It raised a long, spindly arm and pointed a single, bony finger at the gate. As I watched in horror, the heavy iron chain lifted up off the post hook, all on its own, hovering in the air for a second before dropping to the ground with a loud clang. The gate swung open silently, an invitation into the darkness. It didn't need to touch the chain, it just did Italiano. The message was clear. Locks and gates meant nothing to it. The only thing keeping it at bay was my thin metal door. The creature took another step towards my truck, its red eyes fixed on me. Its mouth opened, impossibly wide, and a sound came out, not a voice, but a cacophony of sounds. The whistling from before, the tapping, and a dozen other woodland noises, all mixed into one horrifying screech. I screamed, slamming my hand on the horn, hoping the noise would scare it away. The creature flinched, taking a step back, but it didn't run. It just watched me, its head tilted with a sickening curiosity. I kept blasting the horn, my thumb pressed down hard. The creature let out another screech, this one full of frustration and rage, before it turned and melted back into the trees. I didn't stop leaning on the horn until my ears were ringing and I was sure it was gone. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my truck, jumping at every snap of a twig, every hoot of an owl. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, I tried the ignition one more time. The engine roared to life. I didn't wait. I slammed the truck into reverse, spun around, and drove away as fast as I could, never once looking in the rearview mirror. I never went back. I quit that day, no explanation given. Some things you can't explain. Some things you just know you were lucky to survive. And I know, deep in my soul, that I was not alone on that logging road. I was gate duty for a creature that doesn't need hands to open a gate. The desert sun beat down hard on my windshield, but the air conditioning in my old pickup was fighting a losing battle. I was driving through a remote stretch of Arizona, the kind of place where the map shows nothing but empty space for miles. My destination was a small, almost forgotten state park I'd heard about from a fellow hiker. He'd promised stunning views, and, more importantly, solitude. After a long day of driving, I finally saw the sign for the park, a faded wooden plank barely hanging on. I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. There was only one other car, a dusty sedan that looked like it hadn't moved in a week. The silence was immense, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the sparse desert scrub. I needed to use the restroom before heading out on the trail. A small, concrete block building stood at the edge of the lot, its paint peeling under the relentless sun. The sign above the men's door was cracked, the little painted figure warped by time. As I pushed the heavy metal door open, a wave of cool, damp air hit me. It was a stark contrast to the oppressive heat outside. The inside was dim, lit only by a single, grimy window high on the back wall. There were 3 stalls, their doors hanging slightly ajar. I chose the one at the end and latched the door. It was then that I heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound. Scrape. Scrape. It was coming from outside. I figured it was just an animal, maybe a coyote digging for something. I tried to ignore it, but the sound was persistent, methodical. It stopped. I finished up and unlatched the stall door. As I stepped out, a shadow fell across the floor from the entrance. Someone was standing in the doorway, blocking the bright afternoon light. I couldn't make out any details, just a tall, slender silhouette. I called out, "Hey, just a second, I'm heading out." There was no reply. The figure didn't move. A strange feeling, a cold dread, started to creep up my spine. This wasn't normal. "Excuse me," I said, my voice a little shakier this time. "I need to get by." The silhouette shifted slightly, and I heard a low sound, something between a cough and a growl. It was a sound that didn't belong to a human. My heart started pounding against my ribs. I slowly backed away, my eyes locked on the figure in the doorway. It took a step inside, and the door swung shut behind it with a deafening clang, plunging the room into near darkness. My eyes struggled to adjust to the gloom. The only light was the sliver coming from the high window. In the dimness, I could now see the figure more clearly. It was tall, unnaturally so, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. It moved with a jerky, disjointed gait, not quite human. The scraping sound started again, this time from inside the bathroom. It was the sound of long, hard nails dragging against the concrete floor. The figure was on all fours now, crawling towards me. "Panik, set, in." I scrambled back into the stall I had just left and slammed the flimsy metal door, fumbling with the latch. It clicked into place just as something heavy slammed against the other side. The impact shook the entire partition. Then came the sniffing. Loud, wet sniffs from the gap at the bottom of the door. It was smelling for me, like a predator tracking its prey. My breath hitched in my throat, and I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle the sound. The sniffing stopped. For a moment, there was absolute silence. I held my breath, straining my ears. Then, a voice whispered from the other side of the door. It was a perfect imitation of my own voice. "It's okay," it whispered. "You can come out. It's safe now." My blood ran cold. How did it know my voice? I hadn't said more than a few words. The voice was a perfect mimic, but it was hollow, empty of any real emotion. It was a recording, a lure. "I know you're in there," my own voice continued, a chillingly pleasant tone to it. "The door's not locked. Just open it." I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing myself against the back wall of the stall. I knew what this was. I'd heard the stories from locals in the last town I passed through. The hushed warnings about things that roamed the desert. Things that could steal your voice, your face. The handle on my side of the door began to jiggle. It wasn't a frantic, panicked jiggle. It was slow, deliberate, testing the lock. I watched in horror as the small metal tab of the latch began to bend upward under the pressure from the other side. This thing was incredibly strong. The metal groaned in protest. I had to do something. My eyes darted around the small, dark space. The only other way out was up. The partition walls didn't reach the ceiling. There was a gap of about 2 feet. It was my only chance, with adrenaline coursing through me. I put my foot on the toilet and hoisted myself up. My muscles screamed in protest. I grabbed the top of the partition, my fingers scrabbling for a hold on the dusty metal. The latch on the door below finally gave way with a loud snap. The door flew open and slammed against the neighboring stall. I didn't dare look down. I pulled myself up and over the partition, landing with a thud in the next stall. I didn't waste a second. I scrambled out and made for the main door. I threw my shoulder against it, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like something was holding it from the other side. I heard a skittering sound behind me and turned. The thing was unfolding itself from the stall, rising to its full, terrifying height. Its form was shifting, distorting in the dim light. I saw limbs elongating, a face contorting into something that was neither human nor animal. Desperate, I looked around for a weapon. Anything. My eyes landed on the old, cast-iron pipe for the water main that ran along the wall. I yanked on it with all my might. The old bolts holding it screamed, but they held. I pulled again, roaring with effort and fear. There was a sharp crack as one of the brackets broke. I gave it one last, desperate heave, and a section of the pipe tore away from the wall. It was heavy, solid. I turned, brandishing the pipe just as the creature lunged. Its movements were impossibly fast. It was no longer imitating me. A guttural shriek tore from its throat, a sound of pure rage that rattled the very concrete around me. It was a sound that would haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life. I swung the pipe blindly. I felt a sickening crunch as it connected with something solid. The creature recoiled with another shriek, a sound of pain this time. It stumbled back, giving me the opening I needed. I didn't wait to see what damage I'd done. I ran to the main door and slammed my body against it again. This time, it flew open. I burst out into the blinding afternoon sun, gasping for air. I didn't look back. I sprinted to my truck, my lungs on fire. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking so violently I could barely fit the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. I threw the truck into reverse, spun the wheel, and floored it. As I sped out of the parking lot, I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I saw something standing in the dark doorway of the bathroom. A tall, gaunt figure, just watching me go. Then it was gone, swallowed by the shadows. I drove 4 hours without stopping, pushing my old truck to its limits, not caring where I was going, only that I was getting as far away from that place as possible. I never went back to that park, and I never will. Sometimes, when I'm alone in a quiet room, I can still hear it. That scraping sound, and a voice, my voice, whispering from the darkness. Thank you for watching. If you have your own chilling encounter you'd like to share, leave it in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more terrifying stories from the shadows. Stay safe out there. The flickering neon sign of the gas station was the only thing cutting through the oppressive darkness of the Durango night. I'd been driving for hours, the hypnotic drone of the engine lulling me into a trance. My eyes were heavy, and the fuel gauge was screaming at me. Pulling in, I felt a strange sense of unease settle over me. The place was deserted, save for a single, beat-up pickup truck parked haphazardly near the entrance of the convenience store. I filled my tank. The silence of the night, broken only by the pump's rhythmic clicks. A movement in the corner of my eye made me jump. Through the store's large glass window, I saw a figure. It was tall and unnaturally thin, moving with a jerky, disjointed gait that sent a shiver down my spine. It was browsing the aisles, but its movements were all wrong. Too fast, then too slow. It would lurch forward, then freeze, its head snapping to the side as if listening for something I couldn't hear. My curiosity got the better of my fear. I needed a coffee anyway. As I pushed the glass door open, a small bell chimed, startlingly loud in the quiet store. The figure at the back of the store didn't react. It was wearing a dusty flannel shirt and worn-out jeans, It's back to me. The cashier, a young man who looked barely out of his teens, was staring at the figure with wide, terrified eyes. He didn't even notice me walk in. He just sat there, frozen, his hand hovering over the phone. I grabbed a coffee and walked to the counter, trying to act casual. "Everything okay?" I whispered, nodding towards the back of the store. The cashier flinched, his eyes darting towards me, then back to the figure. He shook his head slowly, a single bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. "Don't look at it," he mouthed, his voice barely a breath. But it was too late. I was already looking. The figure had stopped moving and was now standing perfectly still in the middle of the aisle. Its head slowly, deliberately, began to turn. It rotated far beyond the capability of any human neck, the joints cracking and popping with a sound like dry twigs snapping. As its face came into view, I felt my blood run cold. It wasn't a human face. The features were stretched and distorted, the skin pulled taut over sharp, angular bones. The eyes were what truly terrified me. They were dark, empty pits that seemed to absorb all the light in the room, and they were staring directly at me. A low, guttural sound, like a distorted recording of an animal's growl, emanated from its throat. It wasn't a sound a person could make. The cashier let out a choked sob. The figure took a step towards us, its leg bent at an impossible angle, the knee joint popping outwards. It was mimicking a walk, but it was a grotesque parody of human movement. Each step was a horrifying lurch, a symphony of cracking bones and straining ligaments. It raised a hand, the fingers long and spindly, ending in dirty, broken nails. It pointed directly at me. Then it spoke. Its voice was a horrifying mix of sounds, a coyote's howl, the screech of metal, and a dry, rasping whisper, all layered on top of each other. "You're far from home," it rasped, the words disjointed and unnatural. It wasn't just speaking. It was using a voice it had stolen, a voice that didn't belong to it. I could hear the faint echo of another person's voice trapped within the monstrous sound. My survival instinct finally kicked in. I threw a $20 bill on the counter, not even waiting for the coffee. "Let's go," I hissed at the cashier. He didn't need telling twice. We scrambled out of the store, not daring to look back. I jumped into my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The cashier ran towards the back of the building, probably to his own car. As I jammed the key in the ignition and the engine roared to life, I risked one last glance at the store. The figure was standing at the glass door, its face pressed against it. Its features were now shifting, melting and reforming like hot wax. The shape of its jaw elongated, the nose flattened, the eyes sunk deeper into the skull. It was changing. It was becoming something else. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor, tires squealing as I peeled out of the gas station and back onto the empty highway. I didn't slow down. I drove through the night, my heart pounding in my chest. The image of that thing burned into my mind. I saw its distorted face in every shadow, heard its horrifying voice in the wind whistling past my windows. I never stopped in Durango again. I don't even like driving at night anymore. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the quiet, I can still hear that voice, that stolen, layered voice, whispering from the darkness. It's a constant reminder of what's out there, lurking in the lonely places of the world, wearing the skin of things it's taken. It's a reminder that sometimes, when you stop for gas in the middle of nowhere, you might find something waiting for you that isn't human at all. Thanks for watching. If you have a story you'd like to share, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more. Stay safe out there.